In this video, I'm going to talk about how sugar eating causes chronic pain. Now, this is not easy to describe, and the reason why is because it's difficult to explain how sugar becomes the pain chemicals that then activate the pain system. So I'm left with pictures that are not that accurate that I actually drew myself, this being one of them. So when you see where it says inflammatory chemistry, there's a reason why I use the word chemistry rather than inflammatory exudate. Can you think about an exudate? Something is just oozing. And pain chemistry is not oozing. It is not at all oozing. I'm going to show you what I mean in a second. So there's no oozing in these various painful tissues that you see here, which is where most people hurt. Someplace in the musculoskeletal, which you see here, system, skin, or organ. Those are the most common. I mean, it's pretty much the only places you can hurt. So there's this inflammatory chemistry that kind of just like permeates around the tissue and then activates a pain neuron. Now the pain neuron is called a nociceptor. And you can see the nociceptor has a beginning in the tissue, whatever it happens to be, that becomes painful. And when the inflammatory chemistry stimulates the nociceptor beginning, it's called noci because noci means to injure. It's a derivation of the Latin word nocere, and ceptor means receptor, so it really means injury receptor. Now that injury does not have to be trauma, and I'll show you why in a couple seconds. Injury can be bad thoughts, so that's a great way to look at it. So something really bothers you, you get really stressed out, you can't sleep, and you're just dwelling on it, and all of a sudden you're depressed. The inflammatory chemistry creates the depression, and depending upon where you're most susceptible, based upon your movements and posture and the like, the increase in the increase in inflammatory chemistry that's giving you the depression can also just activate a nociceptor with zero actual physical injury. So it's called a nocere to injure receptor. We need to view injury as this means that a heightened inflammatory chemistry receptor is what it mostly behaves like. I said mostly because there are things that are not worth getting into when it comes to homeostasis about how these neurons work. So there is a terminal of the nociceptor in the spinal cord, and it will activate a nociceptive transmission nerve cell that takes the information up to the brain, and that's where you experience pain. The pain is experienced up in your brain, your cerebral cortex, your limbic system. So this is kind of easy to follow, but it's difficult to kind of visualize, as I said, the actual nature of the inflammatory chemistry. And it's no easier to say that somehow when you eat these foods, and you'll see that I have used this image on 3 of my books now. Yeah, 3 of my book covers. I have used French fries and white bread and cupcakes. As you can see, we overeat these, which is this. It creates inflammatory chemistry and body will hurt. So the challenge is to show you how eating, now this is mostly sugar, right? Some fat and sugar. But the rest of it you'd see, so you got fat, sugar there, you got flour, sugar, fat there, flour, sugar, fat there. So when you eat these calories, these are very high in either sugar itself or flour, which then becomes sugar in the body. And the starch, the white potato, also becomes sugar. And of course you have the omega-6 problem that I'm not going to talk about in this video. But the average American gets about 60% of their calories, and that's amazing. 60% of their calories, almost, it's 56.6, or that's the estimation, or an estimation. So almost 60% of the calories for the average American come from these sources: refined sugar, refined flour, and refined oils that make up these so-called foods. So we eat these, and our body converts them into what they're made of: sugar, fat, and protein. Now it's mostly sugar, obviously, except when it comes to the French fries. And this gets into circulation, and it is the sugar that enters cells in the body, and the cells, when exposed to sugar, release inflammatory chemicals that activate the nociceptor. Now it's not if you just go and say, yeah, I'm gonna go have a donut. Like I had 2 what's today's date? Anyway, let me see here. Today is what? I think almost the 31st. Or is January 30th? Okay, so 3 days ago, I had 2 awesome maple bacon donuts. Delicious, right? Did I have pain afterwards? No. Did I have depression afterwards? No. Did I have anything afterwards? No, other than the memory at how good it tastes and the fact that I'm probably not going to do it again for another month, right? So you can do that once in a while. It's no big deal. It's the chronic consumption of this that's a nightmare. So this next picture is a little more complicated, but you see this is just one. That's a 1, right? 1 nerve cell, one neuron. There are probably going to every target tissue, I don't know, up to 1,000 maybe. Could be more, could be a little bit less. So there's lots of these. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, imagine we got a picture of a nerve here. You have all these axons. This is what it looks like. And that's called cross-section. There you go. So I just showed you exactly what I did there. There's the neuron, the nerve, the nerve, and it has all these axons in it. So this is the cross-section. We're looking right here now. This is what we're looking at. Cross-section of a nerve. You can see you have this area called an epineurium, which is the outer part of the nerve, down to the perineurium. Perineurium is dark and black and bold there to reflect strength and in penetration versus the less bold external area by the epineurium. And so this perineurium, this dark protective barrier, houses all these axons. So these are all axons right here. And I didn't obviously just put them everywhere because I could have kept adding more and more, and it could have been just never-ending axons. But there are thousands of them, thousands and thousands in these big nerves. Okay, so you think about this way up in the top of your, up towards your pelvis. The nerves up towards the pelvis are way thicker and way more nerve cells compared to the big toe because that's where the neurons start. So depending upon where you are, it gets thicker and thicker, and there's more and more and more and more of these guys. Okay, so with that in mind, you have to realize that there are thousands, and that's why we hurt so bad in serums, because the thousands of these nociceptors being, or high hundreds, whatever it might be, there's tons of them, right? Because you got trillions of cells in the body, you got trillions of neurons. So you got thousands of these guys all over the body, and up to 1,000, maybe more in certain. Actually, there's more than 1,000 because it just happens to, it's each nerve itself, individual little nerve down in the tissue, contains about 1,000. So you got lots of those. So you got thousands of these nociceptors. And so when you get an inflammatory chemistry state, it's brutal. So let's go back to where we were before. What I'm going to do now is blow up the nociceptor beginning. That's what it looks like. So you can see. It's identical. Look at that. Yeah, because I kind of copied and pasted and blew it up and all. So this is the beginning. Now, the nociceptor beginning does lots of stuff. So you can see it receives. So this, remember I said before, the inflammatory chemicals. So cytokines are a family, family of inflammatory chemicals. They're called interleukin 1, 2, 3, up to the 30s. Tumor necrosis factor, and other substances. So there's, 35, 40, 50 different cytokines. And there's lots of other pro-inflammatory chemicals released by these cells. So when we eat sugar and flour, cells all over the body release the cytokines. And if they're concentrated in whatever tissue hurts, you're going to get pain. So the cell is exposed to the sugar. The sugar consumption or the sugar absorption causes cell to release cytokines. The cytokines then activate the nociceptor, and the nociceptor then releases something called substance P, which then activates the cell again and keeps the cycle going. So nerve growth factor is another chemical released by nerve cells that participate in the pain developing process. So let's look at this, in the context of this video, and so we're going to throw some sugar into the cell. We pig out, like I had. Imagine yesterday no, it wasn't yesterday. It was 3 or 4 days ago. 12 awesome maple bacon donuts. Now that would have been a bit of an inflammatory bonanza, because depending upon the caloric threshold, there is an uptick in multiple inflammatory mediators after pigging out on donuts and French fries and white bread, and on and on and on the list goes. This happens acutely. So we got to visualize. The best I can think of is to, here we go. We got donuts and French fries and sugar and white bread, creating the inflammatory chemistry, or creating glucose, right? That activates the cell. And then this could be an immune cell. It can be a muscle, joint, tendon cell. It doesn't make any difference. And the cell then releases these inflammatory chemicals. And these same cytokines that activate the nociceptor pain transmission system, these cytokines will activate local cells, and you get nerve growth factor and other dozens of other chemicals being released. You got this blast of inflammatory chemistry activating the nociceptor, which then sends impulses up the axon, hits the terminal, and up to the brain it goes. And if enough of these nociceptors are activated and enough of these pain transmission neurons or nociceptor transmission nerve cells are activated, then you have the experience of pain. And everybody's threshold is very different, so you can't base it upon your friend or whoever, whatever it might be. So when we think about inflammatory chemistry, what we want to be thinking about is more like this. So you have in your body, you've got cells in all of these tissues. So whenever any cell, any tissue, or any immune cell in circulation is exposed to all the sugar, these cells will release their inflammatory chemistry. So this arrow I'm doing right now is basically the same as this arrow right here. Okay, so we pig it on these calories, and then we royally screw ourselves up. So now the other problem, as you can see here, is once you pig out, then the nociceptor itself, as you see here, will then start to activate the cell again, and now you have this ongoing talk that occurs. So this is why when you have enough inflammatory chemistry going on in the body from eating sugar and flour and all these refined calories and these refined food calories, the cell, and you feed it to it every day, these cells are perpetually being exposed to the high glucose. They're perpetually releasing their inflammatory chemistry. They're perpetually activating the nociceptor beginning, and that will then release substance P to reactivate the cell that activated it in the first place, and this cycle continues, and you will be in chronic pain. Now, is this everybody? No, not at all. But it is a lot of people. I'll give you an example. I ran to somebody the other day who happened to buy my book and talking about it and said, I watch your videos on sugar and inflammation, and so what should I do? I said, I personally just never eat sugar, except for once, like the other day with the donuts, ever. I mean, still have it once a month. Just do that. Just try that. Once a month, once a week, whatever. Just like cut it out. So I ran into her again, 10 days later, and she said to me, I did it. I started like 8 days ago. And in 8 days, my pain that's kind of everywhere went from an 8 to a 2. Yeah. So that's how profound it can be for certain people. And particularly for us old, like I'm 60, so the older you get, the more horrific the sugar-induced pain can be. So if you're young and it doesn't bother you, it will if you're not careful. And if you eat crazy like this for 20, 30, 40 years, it's very difficult to dump it when you really need to. So my suggestion would be you kind of start to control yourself when you're young so you don't suffer when you're older. So if you like this information, you can score single copies of my books. Now here they just show the Kindles, but obviously there are hard copies for all of these. There's only a paperback for the new Immune Health book. So single copies there. And over at dflame.com, you can get the volume discounts on any of these books if you would like. And of course, you have all the social media stuff up top here. And hope you like this video, and come visit me again soon.